All right, good afternoon, everybody. This is Welling Clark. I'm standing in for Ed Dills. I am your first vice chair because he cannot be here. And it looks like we have a quorum. Quorum is 7. We have 5 present. We have how many online? 4? 4. All right, we can do higher math. So I want to say welcome aboard, everybody. And I can see most everybody. If you have a question, hit the chat button, raise your hand. If you're in the room, throw something soft but dry at me, and we'll go from there. Okay. So at this point in time, okay, we're calling the meeting to order. And if I am out of order, somebody please correct me real quick. Okay. Introductions. Do we have any? Let's see. Well, I'll tell you what, everybody go around, introduce yourselves, who is present, and then who is also online.
Hi, I'm Chris Crockett. I'm here representing Kono.
Kathy Heisey, representing Calhan.
Gary Sugart, citizen at large.
Andy Gunning, not a member of the CAC, but executive director here at PPACG, and good to see you all.
Okay, good. And those out there on remote.
And Mr. Chair, I'm happy to do a roll call just because that's usually easier.
Okay, please do.
We can start with Ann.
Ann Ish from Green Mountain Falls.
Thank you, Ann. Bill Bowles.
Bill Bowles, Park County.
Thank you, Bill. Summer Earthsong.
Hi, I'm Summer with the City of Fountain.
Thank you, Summer. And I'm going to do my best. Denisa Sultana.
Hi, I'm representing El Paso County.
And that's everyone online.
And we just had another member show up, Judith. We're just introducing everybody that's online. Judith Rice Jones, League of Women Voters. Okay. With that being said, we have our agenda in front of us, and I will request a motion to approve the agenda. And I see another member coming in. Just a second. Go ahead and sit down and introduce yourself. You just did that.
Miley Foster, representing El Paso County.
All right. And Welling Clark, representing El Paso County. At this point in time, since we've done introductions, I'll move to agenda item number 2, approval of the agenda. I would entertain a motion and a second, and then discussion if there's any questions, updates, or adjustments that need to be made. So I would entertain a motion.
I move approval.
Approve.
Okay. I think Kathy beat you by half a second.
Okay.
Kathy Heisey, motion to approve, and say again your name for the second. Do I have a second?
Well, I'll second then.
Very good. You've got that down on the records, PPACG? Thank you. Okay, very good. Agenda's approved. Okay, consent items. I would recommend to everybody, hopefully you've looked at the minutes. Are there any corrections? Well, let me rephrase that. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes as submitted with a second, and then if there are any updates, changes, or corrections, we'll go through that. So do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Gary Sugart, so moved.
Very good. Do I have a second?
Second.
Ann Ish, second.
Okay, let's spread it out. Okay, very good. Second, discussion. Do I have any corrections to the minutes, additions, or deletions on the minutes? All right, hearing none, I would, I'm going to go ahead and call for the vote to approve the minutes as submitted. All in favor, say aye or raise your hand or both. Aye.
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 Up. Okay.
Aye.
Aye.
And excellent. And opposed, you get to write the minutes if you oppose it. Hearing none, 0. So I have unanimous of those present online and present in this room. Very good. Thank you. Okay, consent item. Well, it's part of the consent items we've approved. Public comments and presentations. Do we have any comments from general public that are present? And I don't think I see anybody. Judith Rice Jones, please.
Oh, thank you very much, sir. So I'm going to make a comment as a mother and a grandmother and the mother of a child who went to Steele Elementary School when the city had an active Safe Routes to School project. And it was very successful. Not only was it successful in our getting a crosswalk in front of Steele School on Weber, but it also was successful, this was a while ago, in purchasing cameras that parents and children use to identify areas that they felt were not safe on the walk to school. And it is absolutely inconceivable of me why we don't have that program anymore, and especially in view of the young woman who was killed last week in front of Doherty High School. To me, as a parent and a grandparent, it's unacceptable in not having safety around schools when there are programs that promote that. And so I would like to ask that in terms of transportation issues, that our committee look at the possibility of returning that program. I've called the state and I've called the national organization, and the only program that is still active in our area is at Lewis Palmer, and they received funds for the past 3 years, which enabled them to link 3 schools with an off-road trail and to build, she didn't call it a bridge, I'm trying to think what she called it, some way over a stream that the students could use again for an off-road passage to school. And I'd just like us to at some point consider that, or maybe have a presentation on what we can do to increase safety. That's also in view of the fact that in an earlier meeting, we learned that last year was not only the highest traffic fatality rate in the state, but also in El Paso County and also in Colorado Springs. Again, I find that absolutely unacceptable. And I think we need to look at ways that we can address that problem. Thank you.
All right. This is directed to PPACG staff. From what I have heard from Judith, and I saw some heads nodding, is it possible that at the next meeting, we could have a briefing on transportation safety programs, policies, or efforts that have been done in the past, like with regard to safe routes or things like that, to educate the PPACG CAC of what's available and what we would, as individuals and citizens, need to do to make things like that come back again, or who do we do it? More of an education piece, so we know who to reach out to get to the neighborhoods and other entities. Does the CAC members present think that's a good thing to try to put on for next month? Is that acceptable to the PPACG staff?
I think that's a good idea. This is Ann.
Okay, please go ahead.
Sure. And on behalf of PPACG staff, I'll get started. May need a little bit of help, but I know there are programs out there. Some are run by the state, but there's other discretionary funding like multimodal options funding that's available that that we allocate with our portion that comes to our region. But it's really up to our local jurisdictions. If they want to go after those projects, those pots of money and those different programs are out there, but we don't prescribe, we don't dictate what they necessarily need to go after. So I don't know that it's as accurate to say the Safe Routes to School program went away. I think it maybe is in a different form or function, but we also have other funding opportunities like PPRTA that I know our local jurisdictions are using as well to build crosswalks and make sidewalk improvements and other safety improvements. So I need to huddle with my staff and figure out if we brought a briefing back next month or the following month or whatever, what that would look like. But John, anything you want to add?
No. It's a serious topic, and I apologize. I'm not trying to make light of it, but the Safe Routes to School program is a federal funding program. And so when they said that Lewis Palmer has they don't have an active program. What they have is an active project. And so, in fact, that project did not have enough funding. So they came through the PPACG process, and we've supplemented their funding to make sure that it actually gets finished. And I believe it's a culvert was the word you were looking for them to get over. So as far as the funding, there are programs, as Andy had mentioned, and we'll huddle as far as that's concerned to let you know sort of what's out there. But again, it's up to the individual jurisdictions to identify those sorts of things. That being said, we do see the overall safety issue in El Paso County, and quite frankly, in the whole Pikes Peak region, as an issue that we just couldn't let happen. So we have a few years back when Drive Smart Colorado, who had a focus of traffic safety education as a mission. Because of the pandemic, they needed to kind of shutter because all of their grants were based on goals that said, we're going to meet with these folks in person. Well, all of a sudden they couldn't meet with folks in person, so they could not accomplish their grants. Drive Smart moved over under the PPACG umbrella, and we've been working with other folks in the community to sort of bring that back, and other programs. For example, the city of Colorado Springs used to have a Signs for Life trailer where it would go to the different elementary schools and everything. And it was basically a bus, right, that would go to the different schools and have educational programs. But the bus, alas, eventually broke down. And so they couldn't replace the bus. And so that program sort of went away due to funding and staffing restrictions. So that's the sort of thing that, again, as we bring back Drive Smart, we're looking to partner with the jurisdictions and help fund these good programs, as well as find volunteer staff for them. So we hear you, we're working on it, but at this point, I'm not sure how much there is to say.
Chris Crockett with Kono. I have just a question. I apologize. I'm sort of new to Colorado Springs, so I'm trying to learn things as I go along here. Are the jurisdictions that you speak of in which you just told us, are those the school districts, or are they the city or the county or some other jurisdiction that I'm not familiar with?
So yeah, the jurisdictions, when I use that term, it's usually the city, the county, Manitou Springs, et cetera, et cetera. Now, school districts, while they're not technically jurisdictions, there are agencies and they are partners. So if we were to do certain programs, school districts would be involved. So for example, we're trying to put together a electrification workshop here next month. So that way there's tons of money out there for anybody who wants to go after electrification. Some people have a philosophical issue with it, others don't. And for those who don't, we're going to do everything we can to help them with it. So we've reached out to, was it Clean Colorado, to get the name of all the school district folks. So, but when I use jurisdictions, that's the city, the county, all the different folks. But we do work out and try to work with the districts, and that EV bus thing was just my example.
And then just to follow up on that, are those conversations usually generated at the school district level or at the other jurisdiction, city or county level?
So
who starts the ball rolling?
So usually who starts the ball rolling is it's the jurisdiction that is, well, first, in my 20 or so years of experience, when there's a school that has an issue, it's usually the parents and others that get involved. Probably that's what happened in your case, right? So they go and they say, hey, school, we've got an issue here. We've got either an unsafe situation or this or that. And then usually, again, if the district folks they start scrambling. And one of their first calls they make is usually to the jurisdiction in which the school sits. So if it sits in Colorado Springs, they give Colorado Springs a call. If it sits in unincorporated El Paso County, they'll give them a call. And they say, this is what we're trying to do. And then at that point, they start sort of figuring out what is the actual project? Is it something physical infrastructure where they need to go in and make adjustments like a culvert? Or is it something like a thing where it's just like, well, what we really need is a walking school bus, which is not infrastructure, but it's rather just sort of a program by which we reach out to the kids and say, hey, parents, if you're taking your kid at 10-12 and you're taking your kid at 10-15, why don't we all sort of get together and walk together, because there's safety in numbers, and we can provide orange vests and make sure folks are seen, right? So you got to sort of determine what the best solution is. Sometimes it's infrastructure. Sometimes it's just a program. I shouldn't say just, but it's a program by which these things can get addressed. once you've sort of identified that solution, either at the school level or the district level or the jurisdictional level, that's when they sort of go out and start finding money. Safe Routes to School is a federal program. Money's come in to the state, and there's a state application. So why there's, well, what the statement you make earlier was there's only one active grant right now, which is correct. But there's an annual process by which any school could go after funds, identify it, put in an application, and get funding. So there's, and as Andy had said, that depending on what you do, there are other blocks of money to open up. PPRTA is one he mentioned. The Multimodal Mitigations Option Fund is another. So there's other things that we can sort of do and look at. Some are a regional thing that PPACG touches. Others is a state application, which I'll help you all I can, but good luck, because I don't touch.
Thank you, Chairman.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean that you all had to do it. I considered you all as a sort of resource library that could direct where there are resources. And in that vein, I'd like to let you all know that there's a young woman in town, Zuri Horowitz, who's on the city's CTAB, the Transportation Advisory Board, and she has started, beyond my technology skills, she has started an Instagram site called CS Cars Kill. And she is doing a phenomenal job on documenting every automobile accident in which someone is killed. And not only does she document them where they happen, but she manages to capture footage from television, you know, with reporting on it. I don't have a television, so I would never see that. But I think it's quite amazing. And it's amazing. And it's also distressing because already we've already broken a record for 2023. So just as an informational resource. I didn't mean you all had to do it. I apologize.
From what I have heard from the CAC, would it be beneficial to not overload PPACG staff, but what it sounds like a lot of members have questions of, we have issues, what's out there for us, so we can then go back to our respective municipalities, governments, or whatever, and also our school districts for maybe something like that next month. And I also would like to have that individual, if it's possible, she could come and kind of present at the CAC, because I view this as an education where, and correct me if I'm wrong, everybody, I think this is a aspect of where we citizens can go and help drive what we want to achieve with the help of the PPACG assets and the school districts and our municipalities and governments working side by side. Does that kind of capture the flavor of what I've heard talked about? I know, Judith, okay, but you're good. Sir.
Could, Mr. Chair, let me mention too, I didn't realize until I just looked at the agenda that you're going to get a traffic safety update from Jason O'Brien, I think later on the agenda. And this has become a real high priority. And as you heard John talk about, we've taken over Drive Smart Colorado. And when I talk about our priorities for the current year, you're going to hear me mention that as well, because we're going after a grant. So I think you'll hear a lot more maybe later on the agenda than maybe wait till after you hear Jason's briefing to decide what some of the next steps might be. But we could use help in leaning into this issue, which we've identified as a major public health concern in our region, quite frankly.
I think that's an excellent idea. So let's hold off on more questions with regards to that. And I want to thank you, John, very much. Okay. And Judith, good questions. And bring them up. Thank you. Okay. At this point in time, are there any other public comments? No pothole comments. I don't want to hear that. Okay, at this point in time, I will deem that action item completed and closed. Moving on to agenda item number 5, action items. We have a transportation improvement program amendment number 6. Sorry, I cannot talk. And so I would entertain a representative come up and talking about it, which the project is the lift station.
So that's why I was a little confused. Yeah, it's not a transportation improvement program. It's just a lift station application.
Oh, okay.
So, and let me get my.
He's multitasking.
Danielle abandoned you.
Well, and trust me, she is wonderful when it comes to transportation stuff, and we are learning water quality altogether. So I'm going to skip down to page 26 because that might be the easiest way to visualize what's going on here. So there is a lift station application from Reagan Ranch Metropolitan District number 1, which if you're wondering where that was, because I was wondering that too, that is the area. It's right now being graded and everything else, just east of Peterson Space Force Base, right by the east gate. So if you kind of, and here we go with the map. There's Milton. Let's go up. This is a brand new lift station. This is a brand new development. Oh, sorry.
It seemed like a couple of meetings ago, there was a lift station near Peterson. That same one? Same one, okay.
There was a lift station. There was yeah, it was water in it, but yeah, I'm trying to think exactly where it was. And here we go to site location. Okay. It was Baffles, but it was further up north, if I remember right. And so this, oh, go for it.
Welling Clark here, just for all the member of the CAC edification, I asked the PPACG staff to start logging the questions that we ask specifically to certain type of projects. So in that aspect, they will have a list of questions should another project come up, and they'll be prepared to answer them. I was supposed to do that last month. I fell on my sword and didn't get it totally done. I forgot a lot of things. So I've asked them to, you may get asked again, what is the question, so they can document it down accurately, but that'll help expedite our meetings. Thank you. Proceed.
Yep. And now that I remember, yeah, the most recent one was at Baffles, and that was kind of further north of Colorado Springs. The one before that was a lift station. I believe it was a replacement project, and that was on the north side of Peterson. And that was Cherokee Hills. So that was the Cherokee Hills Metro District. This one is the Reagan Ranch Metro District. And this is for a brand new development. This would be essentially servicing the area to the east of Mark Shuffle and south of 94. Would basically support the development that's going in there right now. This is essentially a project that is being funded by the development, by the Metropolitan District, which will then go and then transfer to CSU. So this is a gravity fed station that will go into this lift station, which will then pump it about 2 miles north to an existing manhole, just off of 24, and where 96 kind of crosses 24. I believe it's called Meadow Lake or Meadow Lark or something along those lines. This has already been approved unanimously through the Water Quality Management Committee Site Application Review Committee, as well as by the Water Quality Management Committee last Wednesday. This is something that they're asking for a approval for to go to the Board of Directors in 2 weeks. As a 208 agency, we are part of the sign-offs on a project like this. I will say this is a project that the site itself will be built to accommodate when it is fully built out, when that development is fully built out. But right now it is only going to fulfill the initial needs of the development. For each additional, once they hit and they've documented the different points at which point they will need to add more pumps and more stations, it's being built on the front end to accommodate adding those pumps and those extra things. But although those things won't be built in right now, at each time they go through that, they'll have to come back for a site application amendment.
Questions?
Okay. I have a question. This is Ann. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I was just noticing in their application that it has not been approved by the Health Authority of El Paso County yet, but that that report will be submitted later. What does that mean?
So based on the specifics, and I think I saw that in there. So El Paso County Public Health is one of the sign-offs. So we are just one of several. This is ultimately going through the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. And so this is where that application ultimately, once everyone signs off, it goes to them. And so I think it's just part of the process in terms of we're just one step in that. Public Health will have their own reviews that they will go through.
Because it looked like it goes from us to the Board of Directors. So then if they approve it, then it has to go to the Health Department after that?
They just need, so there's about 5 signatures on this form, and they didn't include the form on this one, but I know the Cherokee Hills one 2 or 3 months ago did. There's weird to section 208. There's also different things. So depending on if it's within the county or the city, those people have to sign off on it. All those people need to sign off. We just sign off on our part of it.
And
When
this
it
is
goes
just-
up to CDPHE, then it has to have all those signatures in there.
So this
So
is
this-
just for wastewater, sewage.
Yep, exactly.
Okay.
If I could add, this is Andy Gunning as well. If I could add, when I helped out Ann and others on wastewater stuff in a previous life, we all stay within our own lane. El Paso County Public Health is going to look at it for their standards and their criteria. Our role is we adopt a regional plan called the 208 plan. It's a regional wastewater management plan that's been approved, recommended by the CAC and approved by the board, I think about 2 years ago, then had to be approved by the state. So we review applications like this just for consistency with that 208 plan. So that's basically our requirement. Public health is going to dig into it in much more detail around some other pollutant related issues. So we're just looking at it for plan compliance with our regional plan.
There is no dictation in terms of step 1, step 2, step 3. They can all happen individually.
And it doesn't have anything to do with water quality committee or anybody like that.
Well, this came through our water quality management committee, and they recommended approval.
Huh, okay.
So they met last Wednesday on this.
Yeah,
And-
that's what I was confused. I still am, but that's okay.
And this is Welling Clark, El Paso County on the CAC. Essentially what happens is you have multiple signatures that need to be signed off in parallel. And if one of them doesn't get signed off, it doesn't get approved. And so we're just one of the signatories in this aspect for the citizens to give the input with that regard. And correct me if I'm wrong, please.
No, you're correct. We are, I think, like one of 5, and there is not an order where it has to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It could be 3, 1, 5, 2, 4.
Yeah.
If they wanted to go that way.
And that this is purely germane to wastewater treatment to pump up the sewage and then get it into a gravity drain so it goes back down to the Las Vegas reclamation plant or whatever they call that plant, okay?
That's pretty close. Yeah.
Water treatment plant, okay. And so that's along the lines there. And I also understand in talking with staff earlier that this plan, one of the options was to do a gravity drain, but you would have to drill underneath the Colorado Springs Airport. And I think that'd be more expensive than what's being proposed. And I would hate to be on an airplane landing when I hit a rut in the landing field, okay?
Yep.
So please comment on that too. What were some of the other options and why this is one of the best?
So, and that came up as part of the other committee review process was because you are, fairly further south and east, why not just have gravity take it the rest of the way? And to do that, they would still need to pipe it somewhere. They would need to pipe it in the Fountain Creek. Then to do that, you'd have to go underneath the airport. The depth to do that made it incredibly cost prohibitive versus going just over 2 miles north to an existing manhole just across US 24. CSU there's some documentation in there has some support letters on, yes, the Las Vegas facility can manage this kind of extra flow. And yeah, so they did look at other options, and the developer in the process said, no, this was one that made the most sense.
So this is to accommodate future development, correct?
Correct. So that part of where the site location is on the south end of where this development is, which is right now just a whole bunch of just flat dirt.
Banning Lewis Ranch, I believe. Is that correct?
Banning Lewis Ranch, and like I said, it's being built to be able to be expanded to as that development continues to expand. The site location will be able to do it.
That's interesting because then they're going to have to provide water to everybody out there too. That's interesting. Just a comment.
Yep.
Well, feel free to cut me off because I'm new, maybe not doing things correctly. Water happens to be a long-term interest of the league. We were actually involved 20 years ago in the 300-year rule for the county. And more recently, I've actually read the county water plan. Significant that it was the first ever county water plan published in 2018. And I've also read and sat through 6 hours on the county master plan, the first ever master plan. So I'm thinking, because I'm concerned in that master plan, and I actually thought about bringing it and I forgot, there's a page that shows a band adjacent of the county, adjacent to the city of Colorado Springs, and it's identified as the future annexation band for Colorado Springs. So the county identified that this area, which was probably anticipating development, would very likely be annexed by the city. And so one of the requirements is that development in that band is going to have to meet city requirements for things like roads and sidewalks and whatnot, thinking that it's eventually going to be annexed. I'm concerned about water. I'm wondering if it would be reasonable to kind of keep a map of all of these water projects that seem to be coming in rapidly, because not only is it, as somebody mentioned, where the wastewater will go, it's also indicating a need for future water for that area. And I think that is an issue. And I think we need to keep on top of it. We need to see how many developments are going in and requesting new water sources. I read the paper today, and the state is looking at severely restricting water for landscape. It just seems to me in the brief time I've been following this that every meeting there's something new with water in the county. So I'm just wondering if we're kind of statistically keeping that and maybe pinpointing where they are and how many of them are ending up in that annexation band, because I think they're going to face the same problem that the city's facing. Just a comment. Sorry.
So I'll specify that this is not so much focused about the water going in. It's so we're not, whereas like it's the water coming back out. And so that is, as Andy said, kind of staying in our lane. We aren't part of that, the water allocation process. I know there is, so I believe there's an El Paso County Water Resource Congress or something along those lines that talks about that.
Well, in Clark, El Paso County, I can address part of the issue. The county does have a requirement for 300 years of water support for water development in the county. With regards to the city of Colorado Springs, the SDS, the Southern Delivery System pipeline coming up from south, is completed for phase 1. And it actually is authorized for phase 2 that has not been done yet. Phase 1 is 50 million gallons per day. And right now it's being used at about 10% of its draw volume. It's one, it costs to pump the water uphill. And two, the water down there is not as clean as what we get from Twin Lakes through the Mountain Pass and Trout Creek Pass and all that. But overall, the phase 2, when completed, will probably be in the neighborhood of 100 to 110 million gallons per day. Before that system came into play, we got approximately 75 to 85 million gallons per day, or you'll hear MGD, and I do not mean Miller Genuine Draft, okay, though I'd like to as a sailor, but coming over from the mountains from the Twin Lakes environment and everything. So we have capability in that aspect. The question that's coming down the pike is the Colorado River with regards to the water laws and what the states wish to draw. And that's a whole different statement. The key component with water is more at the different municipality level and the government level than it was PPACG. PPACG will work, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, it's more with the regional holistic aspect of the water flow and the waste treatment plants and things like that come in there. So it behoove us, if we have water issues, to contact our local governments and maybe have them come in here and do a briefing, not PPACG staff, but we'll ask the city and the county to possibly do that if that would be beneficial. If I'd like the committee to think on that. Okay. And because one of the questions that has come up with the water rules of what's been coming down just recently is where's the data to support the determinations? And Councilman Donaldson had an excellent editorial out about certain concerns and issues with regards to water. So the freshwater side is not PPACG, it's the unique municipalities themselves and government entities. And from what I've seen, PPACG is looking more at the holistic aspect from the standpoint of like the road systems, transportations, the mass flows of the wastewater treatment plants. Did I say that correctly?
Yeah,
Probably other things too.
yeah, we have no authority over clean water standards and municipal water use and household use. It's purely just in water quality, which means discharging into streams based on wastewater treatment plants and lift stations and the whole system that deals with wastewater management. And again, that's narrow to what's consistent with our regional 208. It's section 208 of the Clean Water Act, of that portion of our plan. So it would be interesting to bring in water providers, but we have zero authority and really no influence to do anything in that space.
And with regards to the questions for fresh water, who on the CAC that's currently present is a representative for the city of Colorado Springs? We have none. If it's all right with the CAC, I'm going to reach out to a couple of council people and ask them, this question came up, and can they come provide? Well, the city council is the utilities board. Uh-huh. Oh, okay. Well, that's what I want. Okay. What I will, okay, with the permission of the CAC, I will do this to move us on is I will contact a couple of council members that I know everybody, okay, and ask that we have a Colorado Springs Utilities come in and talk to us about fresh water supply, because that has been raised at this level. And return flows? Okay, very good. Judith, I would like you to send me an email and I'll put out, and yes, I had another one. Go ahead.
Ann, did you have something?
Ann, was that you?
Can I speak? I'm
Yes,
sorry. I think that would be a good idea. I really, I feel like we're putting the cart before the horse. And once you've agreed to all that, then they're going to say, gosh, well, we've done all this. Now we need to have the water. And it's a bigger problem than just what PPACG is authorized to report today. That's my concern, that maybe we should wait until we hear more information.
With the okay of the CAC, I will send to all city council members, all council, a request that we have a CSU member come before PPACG to brief on water supply, fresh water supply, and that. And from the PPACG staff, what would you recommend that time period be? Like 20 minutes, 30 minutes, or?
I would recommend doing it maybe off peak where it's not a CAC meeting is kind of my initial thought, because we've got other stuff in it that we'll be bringing forward to the CAC that does require action for things that have to go to our board for approval. And that sort of fits within the main mission of what the CAC is. But let me noodle on that. If that's a separate conversation, an informal meeting of CAC members with an interest that want to meet with the city and CSU, that may just be a separate conversation, and we can maybe help set that up. But I'm kind of struggling with a little bit of what the CAC's role is and what our role as an organization is, and then looking for new things to do when we've got plenty of other things we're going to talk about here in just a minute about other stuff that's already on our collective plate.
I think that is an excellent recommendation, sir. And so with that, with the CAC, we'll reach offline to see if we can get with the city CSU and do something offline, not negatively impact our efforts.
Can we delay the vote?
Not on the lift station, I do not believe.
And I would concur, this is really, we're talking about two different things here. We're talking about drinking water supply, which the city has, if you read the papers, they are talking about this like crazy, whereas this is the wastewater side. So yeah, these houses still have to get permitted on that side, and they have to get permitted on this side. So just kind of like we were talking about, we're one of 5 people. Wastewater is one of several things. They still have to get power, they still have to get roads, they still have to get a whole bunch of other things before they can even start building as well.
So I would entertain questions with specifically regard to the wastewater lift station plant at this time, or if there's others. Yes.
I have a question. This is Chris Crockett from Kono. Looking at the maps, it looks like the site is less than a mile away from the airport and from Peterson Air Force Base. Is that a, what considerations have been put in place in case, I mean, obviously Colorado Springs is all about growth. If the airport has to expand, I would hate to have to rip up any of this wonderful infrastructure related to wastewater.
So, I mean, I probably can't speak to that. I know there was something about memorandums at some point between the city and the developers and that kind of thing. I mean, if it's going to expand that much, you're talking about moving Mark Shuffle, you're talking about moving developments and existing homes. I would say lift station be one of several things that the city is going to have to consider if the city or Peterson decide to expand. So, I mean, it's one of those things, I'm sure it'd be a consideration, but at the same time, that lift station would be one of probably 1,000 things that they would have to be moving to.
The questions?
Yeah, this is Gary Sugar.
Gary and then Kathy.
I didn't see anywhere where Peterson Space Force Base was signing off or was asked to approve any of this. They're the only existing housing that's within the mile circumference of the lift station at this time. Are they part of this process also?
My understanding is no, this is only to support the Metro District, which is that Reagan Ranch, which is just that area east of Mark Shuffle. So this would not be servicing Peterson Space Force Base.
Yeah, I understand it's not going to service them, but it's going to impact. If there was an overflow, something there, it's right next to Peterson, it could affect them. So have they been asked to coordinate on this and provide their approval?
It could, and I don't know that specific. I will say on if there's an emergency. And so these facilities are built to handle emergencies. So if there's a power outage, all of a sudden you can't pump it back up 2 miles. They are built with overflows. They're built with generators so that if there's a power loss, if there is something to that effect, it is measured by the peak flow at build out. And so, and it was interesting, the committee members last Wednesday kind of said, you know, when it comes to wastewater, it seems like the worst case scenario is what they always deal with. Because if that stuff starts backing up, people have a real problem with that. And so these things are built to be able to handle, they're overbuilt in a very large way to be able to handle it. If something like that is happening, they have enough time to be able to get materials in there to either pump it manually by trucks or something like that to be able to handle getting it out, because, you know, while it could impact Peterson, you're also talking about all those homes that would be impacted as well. I'm learning all sorts of stuff about wastewater in this job. I will say that.
Kathy Heisey, Callahan. My question is, actually, it's more, I'm looking for an explanation to better understand where it talks about the receiving entity, where they're pumping it into the Las Vegas Street facility, who's functioning with an expired permit since May of 2020. So coming up on 3 years. And they're currently under, this says an administrative extension from CDPHE. Do we have an idea why the permit has not been extended or finalized? And, you know, what does that really look like? At some point, do they say, well, you can't get your permit done? So then what do we do with that wastewater that we're adding to that facility to be treated?
Can you remember which page? I remember reading that, but which page was that on? I am in the exact wrong spot. So with that, to answer to the direct question, I don't know what that process looks like on the CDPHE side. However, speaking big picture, this is one of several entities feeding into the Las Vegas Treatment Center, a fairly major treatment center for the city of Colorado Springs. I'm not going to speak for them in terms of what that process looks like. I don't know what goes on at the CDPHE side. But you know, this would not be the only project impacted if if something happened to that effect. They go through these things. I don't know what that looks like though.
Would this be a common scenario that this type of thing would be in place where we don't have other permits in place? Are you aware of other scenarios that this would be a commonplace occurrence?
I am not, but this is also not my specific wheelhouse. Just kind of knowing how process kind of works at the state level. I'm sure there's a difference between renewal versus new. This is a new project, so therefore it's probably not going to be allowed to move forward without the permits. Whereas if it's an existing project with no concerns, they probably allow it to be able to continue to operate while they go through the administrative process of renewing. That's just kind of my high level knowledge of probably how state processing works.
Welling Clark, El Paso County. Looking back at this, it appears that issue would fall within the bailiwick of the city of Colorado Springs, not necessarily PPACG. And I just want to put for the record, unfortunately, we have no representatives on the CAC from the city of Colorado Springs. That's my understanding. And
I think we should turn it down.
I would recommend that PPACG raise this concern at the PPACG board meeting, if appropriate, that the CAC had a concern that this issue was brought forward, but it's beyond the scope of what PPACG is authorized to work with. Is that a correct statement, sir?
Yeah, I think it's a really good suggestion. I was kind of thinking the same thing, that we could work up the questions that came up in the CAC discussion today and get those to the applicant, quickly, so they have a chance to digest that and be ready to address those when that goes to the board in April. Yeah, that's a good suggestion.
And so for to bring this to the whole and to a closure, essentially, are there any other questions with regards to the waste station, that the project that is on our bailiwick within our scope of jurisdiction to approve, with concerns noted that it falls on other government entities of the issues that have been brought forward by the members of the CAC? Are there any other questions with regards specifically to this lift station? Okay, I don't see anything. Hearing no other comments at this point in time, I will entertain a vote with regards. Our action is to review this and to recommend approval or a non-approval on this specific project within the limits that we are to vote upon. And I'll be trusting PPACG to relay the concerns brought forward to the CAC to the PPACG board, so that we're basically hopefully doing our due diligence in that aspect. So at this point in time, I would entertain a vote. Oh, I think we have, okay, never mind. Thank you.
I'll make the motion.
I have a motion. Okay, make your motion, please.
I recommend, make a motion to recommend approval of the site location application request for the Reagan Ranch lift station.
Right. Do you wish to add caveats to that with the concerns brought up by the CAC?
I don't.
Okay, I will entertain a second. Do I have a second?
Very sugar second.
Okay, I have a second. We've had kind of discussion and did this a little bit of end around. So I will entertain a vote, but PPACG staff will be bringing up the concerns that were cited with the board. And that I would say this from the CAC standpoint, we would welcome a representative from the city of Colorado Springs. And you can shoot me for that. No, don't do that. Okay. So at this point in time, I will call for a vote. All in favor of approving the project that is within our authority of jurisdiction as a CAC. Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I'd say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Opposed?
No. This is
Okay.
Zane.
That's
Yeah,
Suzanne's.
And. mhm.
That's Ann, sorry.
Yeah.
So we have one opposed and the others are the ayes. So at this point in time, I'd say the project has received an affirmative vote with a negative and with concerns cited by the citizens of the CAC that will be brought forward to the PPACG board.
Oh, that's included, is it? I thought it wasn't.
Well, the motion was to approve it, but the PPACG staff said that they were going to bring our concerns forward to the board to help.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
I get it. I still vote no. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. So does staff have that recommendation down? The vote count? No? Okay.
Yes, and we will do that. Yeah.
No, thank you. And it's I just want to say this, the PPACG staff is put in a position where they're limited in everything with what they can do. Okay, moving on, information items. Item 6A, PPACG programs priority. Andrew Gunny.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and members of the CAC. It's been a while since I've been here, so I apologize for that, but it's good to get reacquainted and just let you know what we're up to as far as overall organizational priorities. Chatting with Danelle and Jared, we thought this would be a good time to just kind of let you know what are some of the key things we're working on in 2023. We've got a full plate, and part of my job is to worry about, did we overcommit and is it too full of a plate? Some days I feel that way. But can also talk about the CAC's role in reviewing things that end up going to our board as well. I know the board really relies on our committee structure. That's where a lot of our work gets done. And pretty much anything that goes to the board, almost everything goes through the CAC first before it does go to the board for approval. So I appreciate what you do. I appreciate your review of the work that we have. And apologies in advance for kind of, or based on the last conversation, kind of reining in sometimes and trying to keep us within our lane. But we're pretty mindful of that, of our role and responsibility and where our responsibility stops and where it gets picked up by other jurisdictions. But I've got a couple of slides here that give just a little bit of background about who we are. This is a little bit of a reminder. We can maybe jump to the next slide, or can I advance here? Okay. So real briefly, and not sure if you got this as far as orientation, but if not, one thing that came up is that with our board and some other conversations is we should do a more deliberate job of making sure we're doing a proper orientation of new board members, new CAC members, and others, just so they know who we are, what the responsibility of that body is, whether it's a committee that serves in an advisory role or some other capacity. But anyways, a little bit about PPACG. We were formed in 1967 as a quasi-governmental regional planning commission is a language that's actually used in state law. Please don't ask me what quasi-governmental means, because we'll be here until late tonight trying to explain what that really means. But we're one of 14 councils of governments or regional planning agencies across Colorado, and I've got a map that shows the other ones here in just a minute. So we've got 16 member jurisdictions, I think you know, with our 13 cities and towns and the 3 counties where we operate in El Paso, Teller, and Park counties. We have a few official designations that came about as a result of federal and or state action, and then some other kind of additional discretionary functions that we've picked up that were basically a board decision. But some of the key functions, I think you know most of these already, but we serve as the Area Agency on Aging. So that kind of fits under the umbrella of PPACG, where we coordinate senior services across the entire region. We serve as the Metropolitan Planning Organization, which is a transportation designation to coordinate long-range transportation planning and then funding allocation through our TIP within the urbanized area. That doesn't cover the entire 3-county region, and I don't think I've got a map in here, but it's basically the urbanized areas around Colorado Springs from Monument and Palmer Lake in the north, down to Fountain in the south, out just past Falcon, I think, on the east, and then goes up to Woodland Park on the western side. So that's kind of our urbanized area where we do most of our transportation planning and our funding allocation work. And then we also serve officially a designation by the state as the lead air quality and the lead water quality planning agency for the region, with pretty specific focus areas within each one of those areas. In air quality, it's pretty much around the 6 major pollutants that are regulated by EPA, and for water quality, as we just discussed, it's with making sure we're consistent with our region-wide water quality management plan that we've adopted, that the board's adopted for the region. These additional discretionary functions, these are things that we've picked up along the way over the past couple of years, just because we thought they were good things to do, and our board agreed that, yeah, we should serve this role. You know, we're set up obviously to deal with issues that cross jurisdictional boundaries, and these are things that really kind of check those boxes. So they just made a whole lot of sense for us. We picked up a joint land use study, which is a defense, military installation defense protection kind of program, We adopted a joint land use study, an actual document or plan back in 2018. And then it's kind of morphed into what's called now a compatible use planning exercise, making sure that we make good decisions that don't negatively impact our military installations. The joint land use study actually came up with like 90 recommendations, and we're now kind of chipping away at those, and we come up with a few implementation projects that we focus on with grants that we get from Department of Defense. When the PPRTA, our Regional Transportation Authority, when that was formed back in 2004, 2005, we needed a place to administer that and make sure that we're working collaboratively with our 6 member jurisdictions. So we house that administratively here within PPACG as well. And I've got 2 employees that focus on PPRTA support. We do legislative advocacy, mostly on the state side, to make sure that there aren't state bills that negatively impact any of our programs, or if there's stuff that we want to positively see advance, we provide some advocacy around those state issues. We do some federal advocacy as well, but not as active there. And we don't have a federal lobbyist, but we do have a state lobbyist. But pretty much everything we work on, except for PPRT stuff, it all started with some kind of federal legislation, which then goes through the state. So we try to get a little bit more active on the federal side as needed. And then these last 2 functions are actually brand new things we just picked up this year in 2023, economic development planning and coordination. And I'll say a few words about that and the final one here in just a moment as well, around grant support for our local jurisdictions for federal funding opportunities. So next slide, please. Just real briefly, these are the 14 regional planning agencies in place across Colorado. And we work really, really closely with each and every one of them in a lot of different ways. And I'll give some examples, I think, as we kind of talk about our priorities for this year. But one example I'll give, we're Region 4, and to the north of us in Region 3 is DRCOG, the Denver Regional Council of Governments, and just north of them is the North Front Range Metropolitan Planning Organization in Weld and Larimer counties. We do a monthly call with them. I just chatted with my counterparts in 3 and 2 earlier this week, and there's a lot of stuff that we can collaborate on and just make sure we're kind of working together where it makes sense to work together. So we do this regular collaboration and work on things of joint interest when it makes sense. So it's a good collaborative approach. Next slide. So I think I've got 2 slides on kind of our main priorities for 2023. I kind of self-selected these out of our work plan, which gets adopted every year. This tied in with our budget, but also comes out of our strategic plan that our board adopted about 2 years ago now. It was the most recent update to our strategic plan. But these are some of the really key things that we're focused on for this year. And it's a lot. We've got, a small but mighty team here of about 35 people. And just a lot of things we're doing in a lot of different areas. So just to kind of hit on some of the highlights, obviously doing long range regional plans is a big focus of ours. We've got 3 big ones, either underway or just about to wrap up or just getting started. We're just wrapping up an area agency on aging 4-year plan required by the state and the feds that we do a 4-year plan with a lot of public input. We held a huge number, I forget how many outreach meetings across the region. You're doing the math in your head, Jared. We were required to do like 3 and we did like 8 plus a whole bunch of other feedback options and surveys and things like that to find out from our seniors primarily, what are some of the challenges that you're facing as you're trying to age in place? So we found, I just identified some of the key needs that emerged from that effort. Senior mobility challenges is a huge one. And that's whether you're in the urbanized area or in rural parts of Teller and Park County. And these things are really things that really came more to light, I think, in the past couple of years with the pandemic. It really did shine a light on some of our challenges with seniors with social isolation and not able to get around to like doctor's appointments and basic needs like shopping and a whole variety of things related to mobility. Affordable housing was a big need as well, being able to age in place and afford your mortgage if you still have a mortgage, paying your taxes and so forth. And then generally care support in a couple of different areas, like with our family caregiver program. We've got a lot of family members taking care of seniors and we're not trained and equipped to do that. So there's a lot of capacity needs there. In-home support, if you need to hire somebody to come in and take care of a senior family member, that's been really strained, especially through the pandemic. And finally, workforce issues in long-term care facilities. That's come up as a huge issue. And we've had a couple of really unfortunate examples that have come up with seniors that have passed away in care facilities, not just in Colorado Springs in our region, but other parts of the state and across the country. And a lot of that's driven by just not having a good, qualified, fully equipped workforce to support our needs there. So we're trying to lean into that. Long-range transportation plans. I'm sure you've heard about this a little bit, or you will soon from Danelle and our small but mighty transportation team. But we're just starting our planning process that has to be finished up by the end of next year. Is that right, John? Yes. We've got to be done by January 2025. So we've got that circled on our calendar. We need to maintain a 50-year planning horizon, which means we'll also have to look at how we're going to grow as far as population and economic growth, job growth across the region. And how do we get all these people around? We're going to be about 1 million people in 2050. So piece of cake, obviously. Yeah. How are we going to move around, with our challenges going forward? We've got to have a plan that's fiscally constrained. So we can't plan for and assume more is going to happen than what we can actually financially afford to build and maintain and operate. And then a new wrinkle that we're dealing with this time around is complying with new state requirements around reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, carbon emissions in the transportation sector. So a lot of challenges there in a growing region like ours for sure. And you'll hear a lot more about this here in the coming months and 2 years almost. And then finally, I mentioned this is a kind of a new program. We're doing a comprehensive economic development strategy, or a CEDS plan, which is sort of a term of art that was comes out of the U.S. Economic Development Administration, part of Department of Commerce. You may wonder, well, PPACG does aging and transportation and these other things. Why in the world would you get involved in economic development planning? That was my same question for the first handful of conversations when this came up about a year ago. But a lot of other councils of government like ours, regional planning agencies, they do have a function around economic development at a very high level. We help set what the strategies are by working with our local jurisdictions, by working with our chambers of commerce and economic development corporations like the Springs Chamber and EDC and all the others that are in place across our region in Woodland Park and Tri-Lakes and elsewhere. The big benefit is if we have a federally approved CEDS plan in place that identifies our strategies and has gone through a SWOT analysis and identifies projects that we might want to pursue, then that opens the door to grant opportunities under the Economic Development Administration. We've had a couple of good examples of that here in the past. Exponential Impact was stood up by the help of a couple of big EDA grants. Same thing with our cybersecurity center, wouldn't be in place, but for having a grant through EDA. And those were allowed under kind of different provisions at the time in a different state plan that was in place that helped give us the cover that we needed to apply for those grants, but that's gone away. So if we don't do this plan, we can't compete at that level with grants like that going forward. So we've decided this is the right thing to do. We've got a really tight timeline to get this done. I think we have to be finished by the end of October of this year. So we're pushing hard on this and doing a lot of outreach with economic development stakeholders. Second category here around funding support for our agencies. This is a brand new program as well, our Regional Grant Navigator program. And Danelle is sort of taking the lead on this and working with Jessica and Jared and a handful of other staff here at PPACG. We got support from OEDIT, a grant from them to be able to hire somebody dedicated to working with our local jurisdictions, especially those that don't have the resources to be able to go after federal funding opportunities that are really out there and haven't been available really ever in our lifetime. Under both the IIJA, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, and the Inflation Reduction Act. The Inflation Reduction Act passed last year. IIJA was the year before that. But there's a lot of opportunities out there, whether it's for transportation, energy-related projects, broadband, water, wastewater projects. There's a lot of buckets of funding out there, but it's overwhelming. And we didn't have the staff capacity to really kind of take this on unless we had some help. So the state, to their credit, they stepped up and they're making all the 14 COGs that I showed across the state, making funding available to all of us to bring a navigator on board to work with our jurisdictions. So we just went through a hiring process last month, and we hired somebody that a lot of you may know, Jill Gabler, former city council member who knows our region, knows the landscape of the different partners that we have to work with. So she's working with us, working with our local jurisdictions, working with other grant navigators across the state, working with DOLA and OEDIT and the governor's office to really kind of help connect the dots and identify what's out there. She's working with our local communities to find out what the needs are and trying to match up needs with notices of funding availability that are coming down the pike. So really excited about that. And then finally, not going to spend much time on this at all, but wildfire mitigation coordination is a big focus as well, especially around our military installations, has become a real critical need, and trying to go after some funding opportunities there to help support mitigation efforts. Next slide. A couple notes in our environmental programs. We had an air quality technical committee meeting earlier today and saw Judith online. This is a hot topic for me and really concerned about this, where we've been tracking our ground level ozone numbers that are set by EPA, where we've been exceeding the federal standard, even though we're not determined to be non-compliant at this point. But if we show a 3-year average where we're exceeding the federal standard for ozone, that could trigger a process by EPA where they designate our region as being in non-attainment. And we are really trying to avoid that. We need help this year, and not just from people driving less and producing less emissions and less power generation emissions, but things that are out of our hands, quite frankly, like a better monsoon, a really good monsoon this summer to really kind of provide some cloud cover and lower temperatures. Honestly, we need fewer wildfire smoke incidents and things like that. So, but we're really concerned about this. We know that the feds are going to go through a review process in 2024 to look not just at our region, but other regions across the country to see who's attaining and who hasn't been attaining the federal standard. If we end up in non-attainment, it comes with big economic consequences. But one study I'll mention, we found this last year, Oklahoma City, kind of in a similar situation as us, where they're close to non-attainment. They estimated if they go into non-attainment as a region, and they're kind of similar to us, a little bit bigger, but it would cost their regional economy between $9 billion and $15 billion over a 20-year period with a B. With a whole bunch of different actions that have to be taken by individuals, by businesses, and others that can involve, tailpipe emissions, new permitting requirements for businesses that emit a little bit more, delays on infrastructure projects, and a whole host of other impacts. We're trying to avoid that. Next item, and I'm not sure if we're going to pursue this or not because we're not quite eligible yet, but there's money out there under the Inflation Reduction Act to come up with climate pollution reduction plans that are aimed at reducing carbon emissions, but they also would help us as far as ozone. There's some co-benefits there where if we're reducing, for GHG issues, and it's going to help us as far as our federal ozone levels. The challenge is the guidance that came out on this just last month said that they've got enough money to fund all 50 states with the $3 million grant. That's really non-discretionary. Every state can get it if they opt in. And then the top 67 metro areas based on population are going to get an automatic $1 million grant. So we fell just below that line by like 12 spots, and still thinking we're going to try to apply and see if we can compete. If a state decides not to pursue their funding, then it may cascade down to the other metro areas. So we're being urged by EPA and others to go after it. So I'll know this summer if we get this or not, but this would be a big deal. If we can get $1 million to our region to come up with pollution plans, that would be a good thing. Legislative advocacy, not going to spend a lot of time on this. I mentioned already, we track state bills of interest. There's been a lot of stuff happening this legislative session, and mentioned we lean in on federal issues as well when we can. A big one is transportation funding that we're going to start engaging on much more proactively, I think. And then finally, two things that I think might be of interest. Traffic safety is a big concern. It's a huge issue every time we bring this up with our board. You heard that we took over Drive Smart Colorado a couple of years ago, and we just went after submitted a grant application to the state to bring some additional resources on board to have a dedicated safety advocate, I think is what we call it. Safety champion. I got the wrong term, but yeah, to have really somebody take the lead on this and work with school districts in our local jurisdictions and the law enforcement community and the engineering community and others to really identify what's going to help drive down our really troubling serious crash and fatal crash numbers. We've got to do something about it. So fingers crossed, we'll find out next month if we get that grant or not. So we'll keep you posted. And then finally, the last one I'll mention is we're excited about this, but this is a really difficult concept to really kind of pull together and then move forward on. But we had the notion of, since we deal with transportation issues as an organization, we deal with air quality issues, we don't deal with the built environment. So even though I said in the past, we stay within our lane, these things are really interrelated. How we build our communities and land use decisions that are made, and just how we build overall impacts our transportation needs, which then impacts our air quality. So we're trying to figure out how can we pull together kind of a regional conversation with key stakeholders, public sector, private sector, the nonprofit sector, and others, to really talk about, where are we going? What do we want to look like when we're 1 million people in, say, the year 2050? And how can we use that as a process to address some of the challenges we're seeing around ozone emissions and greenhouse gas emissions, and just to be, smarter in a way, if you could, as far as how we manage our transportation needs. So more to come on that. We're still digging into it. There's a couple of really great examples of other regions that have done a great job doing this, like in the greater Salt Lake City area, Chattanooga, Tennessee, and a bunch of others that have really gotten their act together. I don't want to imply that we don't have our act together, think we're small enough where it's been working so far. But as we get bigger, we're concerned about how that's all going to work going forward. So much more to come on that as we flesh that out further. So we have a lot going on. So if we try to pull back a little bit and say, hey, let's try to stay in our lane, whether it's the CAC or the TAC or other committees we have, it's for a reason. We've got our marching orders from our board with our work plan and our strategic plan. But I think we're doing a lot of really good things this year. So happy to answer any questions.
Questions?
I'm reminded I should have sent you and had you approve the article that I wrote for the League of Women Voters about what PPACG is and why it is. So I will send that to you now that it's already been distributed. You can correct the errors, but it was kind of interesting because what I read, maybe it's not true, is that it was the federal money for transportation that made people realize that regional planning was essential. So that's a theory that I picked up. I don't know if that's true or not, but you could correct it. So I apologize in advance. But I want to mention about air quality, one of my favorite federal documents, which is the toxic release inventory, which I think is about 20 years old now. And it requires all industries, whether they release toxins to the air, land, or water, to report on what those are and how many. And I think that's really significant because one of the industries that we have locally that appeared on the top 10 list when the Air Quality Committee started meeting again with Samantha, it just announced that it's going to double or triple in size in Colorado Springs. And they are one of the largest. They used enormous amount of water, and they're like one of the largest emitters of air. So it's something, just another, in this terms of library of resources, it's something I think we all should be aware of, and it's free and easy to use. But it seems reasonable that when we're looking at these economic, whatever you call them, cells, that we take that into consideration. And on wildfire mitigation, I've discovered a really interesting but very small state organization called the Forest Health Commission. That's the state forester, the chair of the Department of Natural Resources, and somebody from Fort Collins. And it's been extremely interesting to follow their meetings because it turns out there are other places in Colorado where if people choose to live in the WUI, in the wildland urban interface, and of course everyone knows we have the largest number of residents in the WUI in the state, they actually have, I know these terms are really sensitive, whether you want to call it a fee or a fine or something that they pay that goes into a pool for two things, for mitigation and for potential firefighting event, which always seemed logical to me, but I haven't ever heard that discussed. But in terms of fire mitigation, because the Forest Health Commission focused on the fact that the fire is one thing, it's bad, but people don't seem to consider that most of the fires are at higher altitudes. They contaminate the water supply. It's really a major problem. The air quality contamination is really a problem because it's particulate pollution, and that is really bad once it gets in your lungs. And the third one, to see if Judith can remember, it's the smoke. I know. The third one is, once again, you tend to be in a higher altitude, and that's true for most of the WUI areas that are here too. And if you happen to live on one of those beautiful scenic hillsides, there isn't any soil there. It's decomposed granite. So when they come in after a fire and have to reseed, lots of times they have to drill because the ground with a hot fire has actually turned to a cement-like substance. It's very impressive to me to think about. There are so many permutations beyond the fire itself that are serious to think about. So you have a lot, a lot of things to do. And there are a lot of resources out there. I think the more that we can make resources available to people so they can be informed, the greater the value for everyone.
Miley Foster, I have a quick question. I'm kind of view Colorado Springs as, surpassing Denver as far as the size and economic impact in the state and that kind of thing going forward. And I saw there was another Council of Governments. I forget which one, number 3 or whatever the one.
Dr. Cog.
Yeah.
That's number.
Yeah, number 3. So ultimately, it seems like ultimately your group is going to be responsible for a lot more than even Section 3, except they've got a lot more residential area, it looks like. You've got more rural. So anyway, I just wanted kind of your thoughts on that, envisioning the future and how our Council of Governments is going to have to change in order to, fit the role that's coming down the pike.
A quick funny story that when I got here, somebody said, yeah, we're growing together between the Denver region and the Colorado Springs region, PPACG and Dr. Cog. We're going to merge together and maybe we become Dr. Pepper Cog. So I don't think that's good. Well, we are going to grow together, but I think our boundaries are pretty much fixed. And that takes an act of working with the governor and all of our other partners if we're going to start shifting boundaries. So we've been fixed since 1967, so 50 some odd years. But I think that it pushes the need for more collaboration, whether it's around issues like how do we deal with traffic on I-25? And when we built the gap, successful collaboration, Douglas County was part of that, El Paso County and our PPRTA, and wouldn't have happened if we didn't have that corridor regional collaboration. And John Hall was instrumental in helping to help us shepherd that through the process. And other big projects that are in the works and being planned, like intercity passenger rail from Denver to Colorado Springs and then and up and down the front range. So things like that, we definitely need to collaborate on further. I don't know that as far as like population and economic growth that we're going to surpass Denver in any time in the foreseeable future. I think our county population in El Paso, I keep hearing that we're bigger or soon to get bigger than Denver City County as a fixed county population. That I think that is going to happen. But region-wide population, I think the Denver area, they're 3.5 million people, and we wouldn't want their problems. I think they have like 56 cities, towns, and counties that they deal with. So I don't know how they get anything done. We're much more nimble with our size and structure and all that. But yeah, we're going to see continued growth up and down the I-25 corridor. So just we've got to collaborate much more to the north and to the south as well with Pueblo. And quite frankly, that's one direction that I've been a little more concerned about, where we need to kind of shore up our relationship with our friends in Pueblo, because there's a lot of spillover as far as population growth in and around Pueblo, that for folks who want to commute to, say, Fort Carson and other parts of our region. So collaboration is what we do, and that's not going anywhere anytime soon. Yeah, for sure. Sure.
Could I say something too? This is Ann again. Would that be okay?
Please go ahead.
I was just going to say, as far as collaboration, maybe this is for later that you'd want to mention it, but as far as fire mitigation is concerned, there's a lot going up here in the mountains, Green Mountain Falls, Woodland Park, Divide, those areas. We have a fire mitigation committee in our little tiny town, and it's overgrown. See, I'm 86 years old, and those many years, a lot of trees have come in. And but anyway, there's a group up, it's called the Wildland Posse or something like that. And they are a nonprofit, they've just organized, but there are 200 people. This is privately, have gotten together to mitigate land. And they're training, they're doing all kinds of wonderful stuff right where they live. And I think that's good, because you can wait forever for a grant and Rome will burn. So I think we've got a lot of volunteer things going on that is wonderful, and I'm glad you've got some grant person to help. But there are a lot of private entities that will give small grants to buy little things for people and send them to be trained. So I think that's helpful. And the military is also working, you know, for fire mitigation. They train up here in the mountains a lot, and they're a wonderful resource. So I'm very encouraged about just our area, which is all we can really think about. So thanks a lot.
Chris, you had your hand up.
I had a couple of questions. One sort of a follow-up on the wildfire mitigation. Why is the focus only around military installations? Is that a funding thing or?
It's a good question, and it is a funding thing. So we're funding that activity through our joint land use study where we get a grant from Department of Defense. So they want us to focus on, and they haven't been super restrictive, but we got to really focus on what is going to impact, say, the Air Force Academy or Cheyenne Mountain, or even Peterson, quite frankly, and Schriever. So we've got to kind of stay constrained, but we work with the city of Colorado Springs because they have their DTABR dollars that are now retained for wildfire mitigation as well, and try to figure out what's this quilt work, patchwork going to look like, and how do we kind of work together to supplement one another's efforts. But yeah, our focus is mostly going to be the military.
It sounds like the collaboration space is well established, so I'm glad to hear that there will be more of that happening. And then one more question, the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy, will you be bringing those issues to the CAC for our input and questions, which is basically all we have is input and questions?
Sure. Yeah. So we need to bring it to our board for approval in October, and I will make sure Paul Rochette is leading the effort with that. He also leads up our military planning work, like the wildfire mitigation stuff we're doing. And I'll make sure we weave that into our schedule. So we'll need to get it to the CAC in September then, it looks like. So we're hitting it hard, and yeah, a lot of moving parts there. So maybe we do a briefing with you guys a little bit sooner too to get some feedback. We're going through a SWOT analysis right now to find out what our strengths, weaknesses, et cetera. So yeah, looking forward to engage you guys.
And I will say, as somebody who never got that orientation you referred to, I would be super happy to have that come a little bit earlier so that I can get up to speed on it quicker.
Sure. And one thing, and because we haven't been doing as a diligent job as we should, and that's been identified as a bit of a weakness, one area where we need to improve on. One thought I've got is we're doing a little bit of a tangent, but workshops around transportation. We call them our Transportation 101 sessions with our board that we've been doing after our board meetings at like 11 o'clock on the second Wednesday of each month. And we're going to do the second part of that in April. And I've got some other workshop ideas, and that's one of them, about just doing some basic orientation about who we are, what we do. I mean, stuff like this and other questions that folks may have, whether it's from newish board members, new CAC members, other committee members that want to find out more. So I'm going to flesh that out a little bit more. Then I'll let you all know when we're going to do that for sure. Yeah, sure.
Other questions with regards to this briefing?
You mentioned the legislative committee. I was going to say that, you know, that is all the heads of governments that get together for the legislative committee with our lobbyists and so on for PPACG. And you can tune into that. It's a public meeting. You probably shouldn't speak, but I always tune in on a Monday and listen to what they're talking about. It's very informative about our state government. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Andy, thank you very much. And I'll have some comments when we close up the meeting with regards to that too. I think you did an excellent briefing. Thank you. Okay, so that takes care of 6A. Moving on, we have regional traffic safety update. Jason.
Yeah, good afternoon. Jason O'Brien, PPACG Transportation Planner. I'm going to share my screen for a short slide deck here. Everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right. So about every year for the last couple of years, we've given a sort of a state of traffic safety for the region. And this year we decided to do kind of a special one. Instead of just saying what's going on and what's happening sort of out of context, we decided to look at something that the data seems to bear out, is that there's something going on before versus after the pandemic or the year 2020. So really this year it was an examination of that. So I'm not going to go into great detail on that because frankly, the data aren't very deep, but I think they go deep enough so that we can say some things and point out some things that are interesting, to say nothing else. So I'm going to start with just a quick slide of some just recent facts and figures for like a 100,000-foot view here on traffic safety. So nationally, in 2020, only 44% of fatally injured people wore seatbelts. 2021, we reached a 16-year high in fatalities nationally. Speeding has been the leading causal factor of traffic deaths nationally. This is an interesting one. So drivers had alcohol or drugs in their system in over half of serious crashes. And according to one significant NHTSA study, THC was actually more prevalent than alcohol in the systems of drivers involved in serious crashes. And crash data are lagging further and further behind. So something that seems to have happened during the pandemic, which is really unfortunate, is that serious crashes have worsened, fatalities have gone up, but oftentimes the most recent detailed crash data that you can find from media sources and a lot of the time from government sources is actually 2019 or even 2018 data. So it's kind of bad timing on that. Also nationally, and this is specifically since the pandemic, nationally since the pandemic, there's been a major increase in extreme speeding. So a lot more vehicles clocked by law enforcement going faster than 100 miles per hour, not just in rural areas, but in urban areas. And if you talk with law enforcement, they'll say it's also vehicles clocked going 130 miles per hour or faster have also gone up. So really extreme speeding. There's been a big increase in competitive driving. That's the term that law enforcement are using now. Drug driving and other risk-taking behavior. They've gone way up since 2020. And you might think that as we gain some distance from 2020, when this really started significantly, that some of these trends would begin to taper off or reverse and go back to pre-pandemic levels, but they're not. And in many cases, they're actually continuing to get worse. So it looks like instead of just being sort of a blip, this is more like what happened in 2020 was the start of a sea change. And experts are saying that this, if it continues, this is possibly a reversal of decades of progress bringing national crash rates down. A little too early to say for sure, but it's showing some of those signs because again, these trends are continuing to get worse as we move away from 2020 when they started. So drilling down a little bit, I'm going to talk about the state for a few minutes and then drill down a little more and talk at the county level for a few minutes. So general overview, we've been breaking records each year. 2020 was another red letter year for traffic fatalities. You can sort of see how the trends have been going in the bar chart on the right. As of 2020, Colorado was ranked 28th among US states for traffic fatalities, so slightly worse than average. A couple of standouts from last year. So we get a lot of these sort of broken down charts of traffic safety trends, and two of the standouts were impaired driving fatalities and pedestrian fatalities, really going up noticeably and consistently, and that's continued this year so far. To get into a little bit of analysis now coming up over the next couple of slides of data from the state. This is going to look at serious crashes, just to be clear. So those are fatal plus serious injury crashes instead of all crashes. And it's very significant to point out that serious crashes, or these fatal plus serious injury crashes, have a very different profile from other crashes. Other crashes like minor injury crashes or property damage only. So when you analyze all crashes, the data overwhelmingly favor these minor crashes because there are more of them. So that can be misleading if what you're trying to do is save lives and prevent debilitating injuries. So for serious crashes, before the pandemic, there's a couple things that come out in the state data that are really interesting. If you're looking from January 2010 to February 2020, and you look at crash causation and contributing factors, one of the things you notice is that careless driving is a big component of crash causation. And the chart on the right actually is the breakdown of what is careless driving and what are the components of that. And you can see you can see careless driving is the biggest causal factor of these serious crashes. And within that, in orange on the right, the largest component by far is impairment. So DUI, DUID, things like that. So that's before the pandemic. So taking a look at after the pandemic, what we saw is that careless driving is now the lead cause by an even larger margin. But within that, there's been a change. So now DWI and impairment are third within careless driving, the third biggest component. And aggressive driving has risen to the top. So now taking another look, let me make sure I'm on the right track here. Looking at another component of serious crashes, another sort of broad category that we wanted to look at was reckless driving, little bit distinct from careless driving. So in the decade before the pandemic, reckless driving, if you look on the right, was also made up mostly of impairment. By and large, impairment was the leading cause. After the pandemic, again, there's been a bit of a change. Reckless driving is now a more significant causal factor of serious crashes. And again, impairment has been replaced by aggression, again, by a very significant margin. So just looking at these two things, it seems clear, I don't want to overextend what the data can support, but it does seem clear that something has changed. And there are other categories where we've seen these changes as well, but these were very significant. So we think this bears some looking at. And just one little detail, so legally careless driving is absent-minded mistakes and reckless driving is severe lapses in judgment, a little bit more of a serious crime. And again, coming back to analysis of all crashes versus serious crashes. So if you're looking at all crashes, and those are the numbers you're crunching, then the leading known cause is actually careless driving, and the biggest part of that is distracted driving. So for all crashes, including just your parking lot crashes and fender benders, distracted driving is the main thing. That doesn't really change after 2020. When you're just looking at serious crashes, again, these are your serious injury and fatality crashes. The main contributing factors are different. They're impairment and especially aggression, especially since the pandemic. And just as an FYI, the age category in our region, in Colorado, with the largest number of serious crashes, isn't the youngest drivers. It's actually our 25 to 34-year-olds. And our youngest drivers are actually the second leading category age-wise for serious crashes. On a county level, you can see El Paso is one of these graphs, and Teller and Park counties, our rural mountain counties, are combined in the other. Slightly different profiles. El Paso County, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail for El Paso County because even though it has some unique characteristics, it is generally by and large similar to the crash profile of Colorado, the state at large. So I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on Teller and Park because they're a little bit different. So if you look at Teller and Park County serious crashes, there's not really a dramatic difference before versus after the pandemic. And the age profile for serious crashes is a little different. It's skewed older. And if you look at the bar charts again, the same kind we were looking at before, the causation is very different. It's not really comparable to what's happening in the state at large. The biggest causal factor is actually lane violations. And the components of that are they're not impairment and aggression. They're things like drivers not familiar with the area, the driver is asleep or fatigued, impairments in their medical reasons, things like that. So that's serious crashes in Teller and Park County from 2017 to present day. So I know that was very brief. Again, there's not a lot of good data on there, but I think we can draw some high-level conclusions at least, or ask some interesting questions. So just looking at this moment in time and this particular analysis, the most beneficial things it appears we can do are studies of the pandemic and lockdown effects on driver behavior. What is it exactly that happened? And a significant question from that is, will the usual countermeasures be as effective if there are different things motivating this risk-taking behavior? So how different is it, and will the usual countermeasures actually work? Education and public messaging, targeting impairment and especially aggression, better data collection and tracking of THC, and more countermeasures in rural mountain areas to prevent careless lane departures. So very brief, there it is. Any questions?
Yes, this is Miley. I have a question. Can you clarify for me or give me an example of aggressive driving so that I could
Sure.
understand how it's different from, reckless and that kind of thing?
Yeah. Well, aggressive driving is legally, in the way that the reports are done, is a type of careless or reckless driving. And an example of aggressive driving, actually, I think the newer law enforcement term that they're using is more clear. Now they're calling it competitive driving. And I think that says a little bit more. So one car racing another car, or aggressively speeding and weaving. So things like that. Is that helpful?
Yes, that helps me. Thanks.
Okay, great.
Judith, you didn't include the figure I keep seeing is that during those COVID years, people were actually driving less. So those numbers are really, if that's true, those numbers are worse than they first appear if there are fewer drivers on the road. Did you find that as well?
During 2020, that was the case, very much so, yeah. I'm not sure it's been true since then. I know it was in 2020, but it's not just the proportional numbers, but the absolute numbers of fatalities have been going up as well.
And then I wondered, you didn't include gender. And I remember one of the things that really struck me in a geography class was looking at demographics that showed that there are more male babies born than female, but by about age 20 or 21, there are more females because the males have sort of a tendency to be a little bit more aggressive. So it's just considered it interesting that you did not include gender for whatever reason. And as someone who lives in an older neighborhood in Colorado Springs, something that we're keeping track of that probably wouldn't be of consequence to you is the number of trees that we've lost in medians and right-of-ways. Because frequently, if people aren't killed, their cars manage to kill a lot of trees. It's on a sort of a side consequence of some of those traffic accidents. But certainly no good news at all.
Yeah, thanks for the comments. And actually, gender is something we're planning to drill down into a little bit more because we're planning on doing a public messaging campaign, PPACG, this year. And we would like to know, to whom to address the public messaging and how to maybe split it up. So we are planning on drilling into that a little bit for that reason.
And I might mention a specific one for the league. We did a lot of ballot issue programs before the last November election, and there were 3 ballot issues that had to do with sort of expanding liquor sales, and only one of those passed. So we're anticipating the other 2 might come back. And a question that was asked several times was how many drunk drivers there were in our county. And I went down to the police station. I could not get that information. But that to me will be relevant when those 2 issues come back, to know the number of accidents that were caused by impaired drivers. And I don't know if they differentiate between alcohol and THC or not. I assume they're just both considered impaired.
In crash reporting, they are differentiated,
Okay.
but there's a real weakness in terms of reporting THC impairment. It's much harder to test. It's much harder to prosecute. It's just overall a weakness in the process where our law enforcement agencies and judicial system are much better at identifying, testing, and prosecuting drunkenness versus THC.
Okay. Thanks.
Other questions?
Yes, this is Ann up in the mountains. And I was just agreeing, about testing for THC. That's very important. People don't think of it that way, but it does impair your judgment and your reaction time. And back in 1988, would you believe it, I was invited to go to Washington, D.C. by the Surgeon General, Coop at the time. Drunk driving was a national issue. And it worked. It was all over the nation. Everyone was concerned. MAD had started, and it was at a local level. And that's where it has to be solved. That's where our police are. That's where our citizens are. The other thing, I would like to mention that I was involved with the Governor's Highway Safety Commission in North Carolina for many years. And they had a study that proved that all the striping on the roads, lanes, help save lives. And our lane striping is really bad because it's expensive. They're not getting them done as well, you know, the CDOT and whoever's responsible. So that's just another thing that you mentioned, the lane changes. And then, of course, people tailgating, that's another thing. That's like a aggressive, I got to get by, you know, hurry up. And that starts chain reactions. It's terrible. So I think that was a good report you've given, and I really do appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks very much for the comments. And I can tell you that regarding intoxication versus THC again, what we hear from some of our law enforcement partners. So for example, we've done interviews with the Colorado Springs Major Crash Team and other law enforcement, and they'll tell us that the education and awareness about THC and its effect just isn't there. So, you know, we've been educated and messaged for decades about the effects of alcohol consumption on driving performance and reaction time. But what they tell us is that they'll, you know, when they pull someone over who's intoxicated, you know, oftentimes they'll get, you know, a lot of fibbing and a whole song and dance and, you know, people trying to avoid admitting that they've done that. But often when they pull over someone who is high, the person will just say, yeah, sure, you know, I'm totally high, but I drive better when I'm stoned, or, you know.
Of course you do.
And they'll just admit it because the education just isn't there. So we got to hear some sort of funny / tragic stories from them about people just saying, sure, yeah.
Chris?
I wanted to thank you both for your presentation, Mr. Gunning and Mr. O'Brien, and I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind sharing your slides with the group, because they were great slides and my little camera didn't capture what was going on there as well as it could have. But thank you for that. And I also, I'm reminded of how I think education is really key to knowing sort of how our actions are going to impact the greater society. And I know for myself, when I went through driver's ed, they scared the crap out of me with pictures and videos and, you know, this is what it's all going to be like. And when my kids went through, they didn't get those horrifying pictures. And I wonder if a little bit of, you know, horrification would be helpful. That's a word.
Yeah, definitely could be. I mean, education is one of the pillars of traffic safety, and it's definitely something that we're looking at and that we're going to consider when, again, PPACG, we're going to do our own public messaging campaign at the height of traffic season, at the height of crash season this summer. So that's definitely something that we're going to think about for that as well.
Any other questions for Jason? Jason, I want to thank you very much, and I think everybody here is looking forward to seeing more information on that. At that point in time, what I'd like to do now is move to member announcements, and then I'll have some comments to the CAC with what I've gleaned from this meeting. I'd like to make some recommendations, see if you all are on board. So at this point in time, let's see, there are member entity announcements, and it says, what just went out on me? Okay. Oh.
So I've just pulled up El Paso County has put out a request, and I believe you all received an email on this yesterday when it opened, just for feedback on their major transportation corridors plan. So this is in your packet. This is exactly what was sent in email yesterday, so it's nothing new, but yep.
And I'd recommend everybody talk to their friends and their organizations to get that information out, because they're looking for feedback. And a part of it is funding, priorities. You have so many dollars, where would you put them? Things of that nature, as well as some other information too. Okay.
That, you know, I would interject. I saw that already, and you can sign up and you can already make your comments and you can get a newsletter. It's a very good thing. Thank you.
So strongly support that for all members of CAC. Are there any CAC member announcements? Okay.
On behalf of Kono, I've been asked to announce that there will be a public meeting on April 26th from 6 to 8 p.m. at West Middle School to provide input on the community planning that's been going on between the collaboration of Plan COS and the neighborhood networks, and in particular, Neighborhood Network 3, which is basically the residents of Old Colorado City, Ivy Wild, Mesa, Stratton Meadows, Gold Hill Mesa, and other Southwest Colorado Springs neighborhoods. They are also in the process of forming the neighborhood network in District 5. I think our friend Judith is already on that network, but if somebody lives in that sort of central Colorado Springs neighborhood area, and you can find out if you're in District 5's area by going to cscono.org, and there's a thing at the top, neighborhood networks, and you can find a map and you'll know which is your area. But these are great plans that are happening with a lot of community input, but the more community input that's out there, the better. It will be, the meeting at West Middle School will be shared on social media, so please feel free to continue to blast that out if you think that would be of interest to your constituents. Thank you.
Other CAC member announcements.
This is sort of a plea. I don't think we've ever had as many opportunities to hear candidates for an election as we have this year. So many different groups have come forward and had all of the council and all of the mayoral candidates. And it's really been interesting because there's been a real differentiation of groups. I think the League and Citizens Project have done the greatest number of those forums. But what's really depressing is the number of people who've actually voted is way down. So if you know people, you might encourage them. It's really important. I mean, I think the candidates this election, there are some really stark differences between the candidates. And it's sad to think that we put there was so much greater effort and that was almost all of the forums were both in person and via Zoom. So you didn't have to go. So it's, I don't know, another education effort.
Announcements. Okay, I'll call that to a close. One thing I would like to, I've been observing the questions and statements made at this meeting, and my apologies if I did not run a succinct meeting or whatever from that standpoint. One thing, and this is just from my observation, I think would be beneficial if I like the comment to stay in our lane. And that would be very helpful, I believe, is what is our lane from a CAC standpoint and what is not. Because some of the questions were not germane to what we do, i.e. with, say freshwater. But that, but from that standpoint, if we could, I would recommend one, if PPACG staff would work with the PPACG board of what is our lane to help educate us so we can stay on track, focus on what needs to get done so we don't go off on tangents in that aspect. But if we do go off on tangents, who should we contact? Who should we bother? Okay, for lack of a better term. Okay, but I really like that term, stay in the lane. What is our lane? What does the board want us to do? Second thing in there, I really like that briefing, and I think all the CAC did on what is PPACG, kind of like the educational aspect. Both the city and the county do have TV channels. And if, sir, if you don't mind, I think that would be an excellent briefing if we were able to put that video on the city and the county TVs just to help educate the public, and then have them contact members of the CAC. Or we could maybe have a CAC email where if someone sends something in, that could be shot out to the CAC members to engage us more with our own public with regards to that. Just a concept. Third thing is, and this is actually has to do with, actually there's two other entities. One is the Safe Routes program that was brought up earlier, and also the CSU briefing. While those are probably outside, I think, of our lane, that some members of the CAC expressed interest in a I'm going to use the wrong terminology, but an off-site type of a meeting or a meeting that's specifically geared to that of interest. And with regards to that, one of the things that was brought up with this traffic safety update is what is our role? What's our lane with regards to traffic safely or traffic safety, and who do we, what's expected of the CAC? And then also what can the CAC members do to influence it to help PPACG? Because the goal would be to reduce it, as stated by Judith last month, to not only reduce it, but get it to zero. That's the goal right there. So those are some things that I kind of pieced together. I don't know if members of the CAC, if you feel that's pretty much kind of succinct what you'd like to see, just nod your heads, let me know, But I really would like to say, what's the stay in our lane type thing?
Great observations. And I agree with all of that as far as kind of giving us some guideposts moving forward. Don't have answers to all these obviously today, but happy to come back next month and just to kind of keep the conversation going and flesh this out. We want to get maximum use out of all of our committees, and this is an important one that really does vet everything that goes to our board. So happy to bring it up with our board when they meet in April and let them know we had a great conversation and want to get some more dialogue going. I love the idea of getting videos out there on the different networks that exist. We've talked about this a little bit. I'm getting a puzzled look, but we've sort of committed to doing orientation briefings and like our Transportation 101 and other kind of educational sessions like that in sort of mini video vignettes that we can put on our website. But if we can take advantage of the city and the county opportunities as well, I like that because we have a good story to tell with a lot of good things that are going on. We hear that all the time. And like the AAA, we've got a lot of great services and couldn't get into it today, obviously, with just a higher level briefing. But if these are other opportunities for us to tell a good story of the good work that's happening around this table with all our different committees and our board, I really like that approach. So let me dig into this guidance and we'll keep the conversation going next month. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Sure.
Okay. With that, questions, comments from the CAC, PPACG staff, or anyone else online?
I was gonna say as an old lady that I appreciate that. I remember 1967. I was 31 years old. I'm now 86. And that was when all these COGs started, and the purpose was to get citizens involved. And I think, Andy, you're doing a great job. Thank you.
Judith?
In terms of the lane, self-defense here, I've been on the Fountain Creek Watershed District Citizens Advisory Committee for 6 years. And water is a particular interest to me, and there are no boundaries to water.
Oh, no.
The water doesn't know that it's in El Paso County.
Neither does fire.
Yes. And Danelle has recently joined the Watershed District. So obviously PPACG is seeing, that importance. So, and I'm very concerned about water because I'm with the league and I also belong to the league's statewide climate emergency, and water's way up there. So I have a hard time staying in my lane, just to let you know. So
let me clarify that. I welcome people asking good, educated, hard questions that go beyond the bounds, and it's a vision. Okay, and that's appreciated, and do not stop. But part of the thing is, because of what was cited, that we have also a limited time to get things through that our board requires of us, it would be nice to know what they think of value for us. But do not ever think you cannot ask a question if you have a valid concern about something, because maybe we don't do it. It can be taken by the executive director back up to the board and to the appropriate entities. And we represent citizens and we vote, and our elected officials do curry the favor of votes from that standpoint. Political pressure, all us neighborhood activists know how that work. So, okay, so from that standpoint, Judith, do not stop asking questions, and everybody else, because maybe we're not the proper venue, but I'm sure PPACG knows who the proper venue is. And anything, sir?
Really good point. And one of the key things we do, and this gets into our strategic plan, is we're a convening body and we collaborate. You heard a lot about that today, but we convene on a lot of different topics. And even with our board, sometimes, yeah, that does drift out of our lane. But I get a little bit nervous when we get into the water topic, just given how difficult that is. And there's so many other players that are working in that space. And if the board wanted us to be more proactive in convening around water conversations, we would have started doing that. But we've got a lot on our plate already, as I explained. So yeah, I also don't want to shut down conversations. We can convene on other topics that do kind of drift out of those different program areas that I identified, but within reason and with direction by our board. So yeah, but this is all really good conversation.
Comments, questions from anybody present? If not that, the only thing I will say is never stop asking questions, because when you stop learning, you're effectively dead. So I want to keep learning. Okay. And if there's nothing else, then at this point in time, I will close the meeting. Thank you all for being here and putting up with a novice person trying to run a meeting. Hopefully it was kind of okay. So meeting's adjourned.